All right. Okay, hello everybody. I want to introduce you to Karen Wrinkle. Karen is joining us today to talk about cranial sacral therapy. She's got a wealth of knowledge for the last 25 years or more, and she's here today to tell us about how it helped her, how she got into it, and how it can help you, for you to help yourself. Thanks, Karen.
You're very, very welcome, Trish. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. So you're a Canadian, grew up in the Bahamas, I see, and I understand you just came back about 7 years ago. So welcome back to Canada.
Yes, thanks.
It's good to have you. So I know that you were experiencing debilitating headaches, and I think that played a role in how you journeyed your path. Do you want to tell us some more about it?
Yes, I'd love that. So in my early 20s, I started off as a fitness instructor and a trainer, personal trainer. And I got into stretching and learning about fascia. That sort of was coming into the mix. I was very interested in that. But in the meantime, I was developing debilitating headaches to where I was unable to. The pain was so debilitating that I was unable to get up out of a chair without holding my head as I raised. And it lasted for about 3 years. I saw pretty much everyone that you could actually see. I was living in the Bahamas, and at that time, at that age, in my 20s, many specialists weren't there, so I'd have to go to Florida. I saw top neurologists in the field. I had CAT scans and MRIs, encephalograms. I had acupuncture. I went on diets. I went on certain pain meds. I had orthodontic work for about a year. That helped a little bit. I flew to see a chiropractor once a week to Florida. It helped a little bit. I basically had to stop working, and I was losing friends because I was miserable.
Oh my gosh.
And it was I was just in so much pain all the time. And it never went away, just got worse. Some days were worse than others. And so I was at one of these in Florida, similar to rolfing, which is body work on releasing an aspect of fascia. And there was a speaker there, and his name, I guess I can say his name, Dallas Hancock. And I remember him, and he had a cowboy hat on. It was just incredible. And the teacher mentioned my situation to him, and he offered on a Sunday to come, into his clinic, and he worked on me for 2 hours. He asked me things about myself, but I said, I was pretty healthy, and I used to run and everything, and I didn't really have any idea why my head hurt so much. And so he worked on me, and after 2 hours, he said to me, he says, what in the world has happened to your head? He says, your maxilla is shoved up into your sphenoid on the left side. And your maxilla, the top, your maxilla, and the sphenoid is a big part of the orbit of the eye, the cranial bones. And he says, what happened? And I was thinking, and I said, well, when I was like 15, because at 22 or 23, 15 was like a long time ago. I used to ride horses all the time, and a massive horse reared, and his head just crushed up into my face, and my tooth on my left side flew out of my mouth. And I'm like, yes, because this is the, the artificial fake tooth cap. And he says, well, that would do it.
So, oh my gosh.
And so after that, I never had any pain, and has never come back in 40 years. So 40 years, yes, I am that old.
Wow, so, that's incredible.
So, that happened to me. I experienced that. And so I pursued, I went into body work. I became a massage therapist. into, neuromuscular, which is really specific trigger point. Janet Travell's work a bit, with trigger points and muscles, very specific muscular work, and introducing, that cranial work was introduced to that in that a little bit, and then the myofascial release and the cranial work was introduced into that a bit, and then I just, went full on into cranial work, and I believe all of us are a sum total of all the things that we've learned, so all that stuff is in there somehow.
Yeah.
But the cranial work was just the icing on the cake for training, for me to gain skills in developing my proprioception in my hands to a degree that I never had imagined, right? So it just went from working with soft tissue in the body on a more superficial, muscular, superficial fascia into being able to feel pretty much anything, any aspect of the body completely, and having a different understanding of the connectivity of fascia and the global matrix, the network that our fascia is. And so it's been an incredible journey, affecting tissue that is restricted that can cause dysfunction and pain. It's been really incredible.
Okay. Wow. And you're helping people get
I
rid of
seem
their
to
pain
be.
and their dysfunction. That's amazing. I mean, that's wonderful.
Well, it is, and it is an incredible privilege. It's a very a sacred thing when someone trusts you and lays on a table, and you can, you meet people in all different places, and that's a very important aspect of cranial work, is that to be neutral. We might have different words for that. Neutral, witnessing, being with a person, listening to them, acknowledging what they're saying and where they are. And so that meeting, that initial meeting can be very open and warm and trusting right away. And that might take time to develop, right? So it's all
Right.
relative as to, and to have that respect for whoever is it with you, right? And to
Right.
meet them where they are, and inspire and facilitate, to be a facilitator, to help them move
Right.
to places that perhaps is more optimal for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit more about the fascia? I understand that, and I just recently learned this because I had some fascial release treatments, that the fascia is actually a sheath that goes from head to toe. Is that correct? Is that my
Well, that's
understanding
that's
correct?
very interesting, because we, I think, some of us have never even heard of fascia, and we often think of something. Sometimes is often mentioned when you cut a piece of chicken and you see that sheath, not the
Mhm.
fat, but that sheath, right? And that'd be
Mhm.
covering over, say, a breast, which is a muscle, right?
Mhm.
So yes, there's a sheath around the muscle. And one thing you mentioned that is very correct is that the continuousness, like it is a continuous thing, but it's way more than just a sheath, right? A sheath could be around a muscle fibers, or muscle fascicles, like, sheaths around something. But there's so many different layers of these sheaths, right? So fascia actually surrounds every cell, right?
Oh,
It's
really?
so spider web like, and so it's a continuous matrix that surrounds, supports, separates every aspect of our body. So every nerve, every capillary, which is very tiny. So when you think about it, if you stood up and, what would stop our capillaries and our venules and our veins, and, from kind of falling into a glump? So they're
Of course.
supported by a network of fascia. If you take
Okay.
a capillary out, pull it out, you can see the tubule left in the fascia, right? So
Oh,
fascia
wow.
not only is functioning as far as separating and supporting the structure, but it also is it actually has much more function in passing nutrients, and they're just a lot more function than they ever thought before.
Oh,
So
really? Huh.
it is a continuous, around it surrounds every organ, right? So
Okay.
fascia, the dura around our brain, the outer of our meninges, the dura,
Yes.
which
Yep.
attaches
Yep.
on the inside of the skull, surrounding our brain, and then also comes down, surrounds our spinal cord. And that dura makes a sleeve with every single spinal nerve as it exits the spinal column through the foramen,
Right.
right? This dura is a form of fascia, right?
Okay.
So, um, yeah. So when you touch somebody, so actually what happens is this fascia, when it's optimal, has a sliding and gliding quality. So when we
Okay.
move, our organs actually slide and glide on each other. Our muscles, as they move, slide and glide on each other, right? So there's tremendous contributors to the knowledge of, fascia. One of them is, I remember his name, his Italian hand surgeon, Jean-Claude Umberto. And he was one of the world's leading, is hand surgeons, like reconstructing hands.
Hmm.
And he did it impeccably. And the hands just wouldn't be the same, right? And he's like, why? I am putting it together completely anatomically correct. And he put an electron microscope in a living people as he did surgery. And it was the first time that people could see fascia in a living person,
Oh, cool.
because all our fascia is mostly seen in cadavers, right? Which is completely different. And most of it's not even visible. And many doctors I've talked to, in their dissections, they would clean all the fascia off the cadaver and throw it in a bin so they could see all the important stuff, right? So, yeah, well, which is just
It's
the
ironic.
way it was, right?
Yeah.
So the visuals of fascia in a living body are just incredible. It's an incredible network. So when you think about it, this fascia supports all of our structures, right? And all of our functioning of our body is in these structures, right? All of our functioning of digestion is in structures of stomach and this and that, right? And all of our functioning, our nervous system is functioning through nerves, right? So when you think of, so just to hold that thought, we are made up of fascia. And when we go through life and we start to experience things like repetitive strains, caused by repetitive motions, traumas, surgeries, inflammations, emotional stresses, any kind of stresses or impacts that come from the outside come into our, our structure, our fascia, and the energy of these impacts, are embedded into our bodies. Some of it's dissipated and some of it's not. So the energy of impacts, tension, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't get dissipated is, has been introduced into whatever tissue it is. So the harder the tissue is, for example, bone, it's harder to dissipate that, right? If it's something like water or viscous organs, sometimes that energy could be dissipated a little easier, right? So whatever the body can't dissipate, it compensates for, right? So, other things have to, take over more, or it walls it off. So over time, whatever other things come our way will collect, and there'll be a compounding effect, right?
Okay.
Over time in our fascia. So parts of our fascia that might have been restricted and more dense and more gristly and not as fluid or hydrated for whatever reasons, that actually can then attract more attention to it. So over time, this is why things can compound. And then somebody sneezes or something and they say, oh my God, I threw my back out, right?
Right.
Well, a sneeze can't really do that, but it's like the straw on the camel, right?
Right.
Because of
Okay.
this compounding thing. So that's one of the reasons why sometimes it's mysterious, like mysterious, because they don't know why, right?
Mhm.
But there's been a collection of things over time. And so there are lovely diagrams that show this so you can get nice visuals. Um, but what I do, or what we can do, is feel where these restrictions are and connect with them in a way that facilitates the body self-correcting and letting
Now,
go of
is
that
that
tension.
feeling because you've taught yourself, I heard you say that you have great perception with your hands, so this is something that you develop over time after you treat so many people?
Very much so.
Um,
They're developing the proprioception in the
okay,
fingers.
okay.
Um, and that's an interesting point, because Dr. Opledger, who put this form of craniosacral therapy together, just a master genius, amazing person that I was very privileged to meet and be taught to before he passed on.
Mhm,
Um, he used to say, why limit yourself as to what you can feel in your hands, right?
mhm.
And that's true. So I think you know, things that can contribute to our chronic pain are limiting things. When we limit ourselves, we limit ourselves in thinking that we can't do anything about it. We can't change it, right? That's a
Mhm,
limiting thought, which is
mhm.
understandable often. Um, but limiting thoughts as far as what you can feel. So I think that was one of the greatest things that he taught me, was to get out of our own way so
Mhm,
we could feel. Because getting out of your own way is, what do I feel? Is this real?
mhm.
Am I really feeling that?
Yes,
And to really
yes,
look at these thoughts
yeah,
and butt them out so you could
yes,
actually start feeling. So it is a tremendous process of trusting and being inspired.
yes.
And so I think that many people ask me, if I may, you know, how does this work? Because craniosacral uses very light touch.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I started off doing fascial work, it was something similar to rolfing. And I would get on my table with my elbow out, which was a deadly weapon. And I would just, plow myself through people. And it it would cause changes um, with a person's structure, pain, appearance, as far as how they would be able to stand up after with greater ease. But I realized that the changes were sometimes quick, but they weren't very sustainable,
Mhm.
right? They would come back. So knowing what I know now, that was just dealing with an aspect of the fascia, the collagenous part of the fascia, which is your, no, sorry, excuse me, the elastic part of the fascia, the fibers,
Mhm.
where you released it, right? There's like
Yes.
the rubber band part of the fascia, but then
Okay.
it would come back. Well, so with this work now, with a light touch, people often say, well, how could you do anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Well, it's as we start to understand the nature of fascia, the collagen is just the elastin is just a part of it, and it has other different aspects to it. This light touch, this engagement of light touch, is is a place where um, this fascia will want to self-correct, and you are just engaging that process and facilitating it so it can self-correct. It actually unwinds and you just follow it, right? If you pushed fat hard onto fascia, if you push like how I did with my elbow, the body just um, the fascia just pushes back. If you get hit
Mhm.
by a car and you get flung across the road and
Mhm.
you don't fall apart, it's because your fascia met that force of the car so that you wouldn't fall apart, up to a
Okay.
point, obviously. So it's this light touch of engagement that doesn't turn on that switch of resisting, the fascia resisting, right? And you feel it's this beautiful place. And one of my great teachers, Tad Wanvier, he called it the place of dynamic poise. And it's just this place where you're not pushing it, but you haven't lost it. You kind of just with it, and it will unwind, just like a telephone, like the old fashioned telephones, the wires that would wind up and you'd pick it up and it would start to unravel on its own.
Right.
Yeah. And so the light touch will actually affect the scope of fascia rather than just certain pieces of it.
Okay.
And it is much more sustainable.
Okay. That's awesome. I two questions for you. So I understand you can do this by distance.
Well, that's what I was told. And I said, really? So that's an interesting. So there's always some mysteries to these. There's always some mysteries, and I think the little tiny bit I know about or have heard about, the quantum physics, quantum realm, in that, you had our science, our sort of Newtonian science of cause and effect, and this is what reality is. And as we progressed and progressed, and even Einstein started to stumble onto the quantum realm before he went off into a different space. But so the quantum realm is the subatomic realm, and I just know little bits of this, but so our atomic are more what we call real around us. Behaves differently than the subatomic world. The subatomic world behaves differently than our normal regular world, right? So in that realm, time doesn't really seem, or distance doesn't seem to really matter, right? One of my great cranial teachers was a professor of physics at MIT, and he found craniosacral. He had quite a severe illness, and he found tremendous relief with craniosacral, and he was quite surprised that it helped him so much. And so he started to train in it, and he's now one of the top practitioners and teachers of craniosacral. And one of his lectures was the physics of intention. But he was a physicist, so he wanted to know how things worked, right?
Right.
With
Right.
the part of the mystery parts, right?
Right.
And a lot of the mystery parts of craniosacral are because we don't understand the anatomy and how fascia responds. And there's cutting edge anatomy, such as that there are movement in the sutures of the skull. So there's models that have changed,
Okay.
and there's the understanding of fascia, but there's also this part of what our intention, how that plays a role in the effectiveness of this. And with our intention, even putting our hands on a body, and he would say that the energy would follow thought, right? So we're probably familiar with the idea that if someone has a goal, they may be more successful than somebody when you ask them what they would like to do and they say, I don't know, right? Probably they won't go in the same direction or the speed or whatever as someone who's, I want to do this, right? So we are familiar with the concept. So taking that even further, when you look at the intention of connecting with a person, and this all came about because of COVID, right? And people have been doing this, and this is not new to certain schools of thought in the world. But with this practice, so with our connection and our neutral and our witnessing, as we do when we sit with someone's body, if we apply that to connecting, like say I'm connecting with you now, the same thing would apply to be present in ourselves and to witness and listen to who you are and what is being said. And if someone says, I'm feeling pain, and you ask them where they feel that, as you might if they were in the room, and they bring their awareness to where they feel this, and you ask them, what does it look like? Or does it have a color? Or does it have is it fiery? Is it sharp? Right? So
Mhm.
all these ways of talking, connecting, with all comes up because you're just listening,
Right.
is it allows the person to connect more with themselves. So we are just facilitating a person connecting with themselves. So anytime
Okay.
anyone ever feels better or heals or is out of pain is not because of us, not because of me. It's because what we have done, which has enabled a person to connect with themselves, to even receiving the fascial work. Yes, because if someone is totally open and not into receiving, the work will be limited, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
when you're in a distance, when we are actually listening to a person and out of our own way, we are allowing that person to hear themselves.
Mhm.
And in this connection, this is a way, not the only way,
Mhm.
for many things to become, and you mentioned this while we talked before we were being recorded, about a shift that happened in yourself. And um,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And this shift was, and I can't remember exactly, was because you had become aware of something that you weren't aware of before.
Yes.
And so if someone becomes aware of something they're feeling, and just in the act of allowing and witnessing and honoring, many things can come up in a person. And
Mhm.
this what this brings up is, as you know, there are many reasons why someone can be dysfunctional, in chronic pain, uh, and it's very important to get checked out by your medical uh, doctors to eliminate the dangerous things, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
many times in chronic pain, there is nothing that people find, right? And medication is used, and that often is a great blessing if there's nothing else that can help a person. Obviously, there's a time and place for that. But often in chronic pain, and I've talked to many doctors, they're so frustrated because they would love to do more. They don't know what the cause is, right?
Mhm.
And that the medication can become, you know, its own side effects as a crutch, as a bandage, and can often lead to addictions and whatever.
Mhm.
So
Yes. Mm.
when you're witnessing with a person, say on Zoom, like I am with you, and I'm facilitating that process of someone noticing something in themselves, this, so as I was saying, there can be, you want to eliminate, medical emergencies and urgent things. There can be or factors that can come into our life that can affect our dysfunction, like, viruses and bacterias, and what we eat,
Mhm.
the company we keep, the movement in our lives, what we do
Mhm.
for a living, the repetitive
Mhm.
strains, our surgeries, all these things. But also a very big component, often very much overlooked, is what can be called, psychosomatic, but we often think that that's just something that could be in our head. But
Mhm.
it's aspects of ourself that have deep programming that
Yes.
perhaps have been there for years and years and years, that are constantly generating this low grade emotions in us, right? And we know that if we have extreme anxiety about something, we can elicit our fight or flight in our autonomic nervous system and get an upset stomach. And we understand all that, right?
Mhm.
But if there are underlying emotional parts of us that are often unconscious, that are contributing to this constant uh, input to our nervous system,
Mhm.
that could be creating, all kinds of physiological dysfunctions, right?
Mhm.
So cranial work, even with someone on the table, is helping, being facilitating the process of someone becoming aware of that connection in themselves, just to be aware of it, because more than likely they never were aware of it. And that
Right.
can contribute to the shift. But that
Yes.
can also happen at a distance.
Right.
Because if
Right.
you're really paying attention and you're connecting with the person and you're facilitating that process, what is the difference? Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Especially
so,
when it's
yeah.
light touch when you're in person.
Well,
So
well, there,
there's
right.
there's more
So it's
going
just a
on
really
than we
lighter touch.
realize. Yes. So now I know that you mentioned how we can help ourselves. So it sounds like we can be facilitated certainly by someone like yourself.
Yes.
And can I learn how to do this to myself, or um, do we
Well,
just? Can you just speak
yeah.
a little bit about that?
Well, I think that so on a physical, like physical, fascial, um, what I hear often is perhaps when people are at the end of the line, often people that are at the end of the line as far as seeing many people like I did myself and just not, and it's not like these people don't have great things to offer. It's just that they're not addressing really the fascial system, which is one of the biggest contributors to dysfunction and pain after eliminating the important things, as
Mhm.
we said. Um, Sorry, I just lost track here. I get so passionate. I go down these little side tracks. um,
Yeah.
so,
Can
when they're
someone
at the
learn how
end
to
of the,
do it?
yeah, no, yeah. So when they're at the end of the line, they feel despair and like there's nothing they can do. So often, if they have a positive experience, again, that would be like, wow, I could actually come to you, and that there could be changes. Some people have thoughts that nothing can even change.
Right.
So that is that's a huge thing in helping yourself, is that there are things out there, and this is what you're providing, by what you are embarking on is this is a huge thing, is to let people know what's out there, because that's that's the big obstacle. People don't
Yes.
know, right?
Yes.
So this is the first step in helping yourself, is to find out what's out there.
Right.
Yes, and you can go to someone, but I have never been one to want someone to depend on me to feel better.
Mhm.
I want to be part of the process of them emerging into a different space, right?
Right.
So yes, coming in and taking advantage of people that can help, and trusting, that and knowing who and who they are and what they can do. So education. Um, and then, the mindfulness part of perhaps taking moments in the day to notice themselves, like what happened on the table,
Mhm.
to take time, with themselves and notice, what are you feeling? It sounds so simple. Uh, and where does that come from? This anxiety. And perhaps in a session, you may have become aware that anxiety has something to do that's happened in the past.
Mhm.
And does it apply to you now?
Mhm.
Well, not really. And
Yes,
again,
it could be the
it's the awareness. Like
old
all these things we
tapes that
carry
we've
around
been
by default. It's like
running.
all over us. Like no wonder
Yeah.
we feel so heavy sometimes, right? And
Right.
so the awareness and taking the time, like, well, that's not true anymore. That doesn't really serve me anymore.
Mhm.
And it's also this process is also a process that honors yourself. You're honoring yourself. So there's that aspect, but also physically, there are, what we call, and again, words are often, people have associations with certain words and they're loaded, but stretching or yoga or well, the first part of just reflection could be meditation, that type of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
But being gentle on yourself, but the stretching. So, what is stretching? Because you can stretch and you can be hurting yourself, right? So to learn about that, you
Right.
could be doing yoga and really hurt yourself.
Yes.
So just doing yoga is not like the great, I'm doing yoga. How are you doing yoga? How are you stretching? You're putting your body into a position. What is the connection with yourself as you're in this position? Are you engaging these restrictions, these limitations in a way like with me on the table? Am I pushing against you? Because it's not very productive or sustainable. That would apply also to yourself. If you're pushing into something, you know, you're not, you could hurt yourself and you're not going to be productive. And that's one reason many people stop these activities, because they don't see any results, because they're not doing it properly, right? They're doing it in a way that doesn't give them the results, and then they get discouraged, right?
Mhm.
So it's about connecting with your body and engaging these restrictions. Perhaps that there's awareness of, in a session, you're more aware of opening the chest. What is it like to open your chest? Well, how can you do it? And then how are you in it? Like, what are you feeling? Is it productive, right? So people are often, as I mentioned earlier, I do those stretches, but they do nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then if we learn to connect with ourselves in a way where we do something so simple as open up our chest in a way where, we're encouraging the body to let go. We're developing this relationship with ourselves so that our body starts to trust us. Because often we push through things and we, blast through things, and you wonder why. And that's the favorite line that just pops into my head when someone comes in and they say, "Oh my God, my back is so bad. I have a bad back." And I'm like, so what does your back feel about you? What does your back feel about you? Meanwhile, perhaps they're not listening. Perhaps they're doing all these things that's hurting your back. And it's like your back is talking to you, right? Our body in our pain is talking to us. And it's about starting to listen. And so that's the biggest way
Right.
that we can help ourselves. And there's different ways to do that, with meditation,
Right.
with stretches, with, activities. Movement is imperative, but it's all about the quality and relative to each single person. So, I think connecting in this way and being a part of this passionately with people, it's like they can be inspired to connect with themselves in a different way, and be inspired at the thought that things can change.
Yes. Yes. What a fascinating overview. Thank you very much.
You're very,
That's
very
great.
welcome.
That's great. That's awesome. I just want to remind everybody that Karen is going to be giving a little gift as a thank you for joining us at the summit, as are all our other speakers. And we will have Karen's information. So if you wanted to reach out with any questions or anything, hopefully you would be open to that. I should have asked you that beforehand.
I am.
Yeah,
I am totally. You just lead the way.
yeah.
You
And
lead the way.
then
Tell me what
please,
to tell you. I'm very happy. I love talking to people. I love being part of inspiring and moving forward. And I'm very
okay,
excited. I'm sure
fantastic.
you can tell a little bit about that.
Yeah,
I
yes, yes. I can tell you're very passionate. It's fantastic. We're also going to have a Facebook group where all of our viewers are invited to join us, and you'll be invited to join us too. So there may be some
Awesome.
engagement in that group or not.
Absolutely.
But again, thank you very much. It's been
Right.
great meeting you. I hope to meet you in person one day.
Yes, yes, that would be so wonderful, right?
Yeah,
I have
yes,
friends in Ottawa, so
yeah. Okay.
and I really appreciate you, Trish. I appreciate being asked, but I really appreciate your inspired movement in this direction to help people.
Yes.
So spectacularly wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much. Okay. Have a
Okay,
good evening.
bye.
All right. Bye-bye.